Hello and welcome to What Lingers, the podcast where we uncover the questions behind people's stories. I am Christian Figueroa.
And I'm Liz Melkor. Together, we're the team behind Storytelling Lisboa, where once a month, 10 storytellers get on stage in front of 200 people and share true personal stories around a theme.
It's always an incredible night, but there is a catch. We always have lingering questions for the storytellers.
In our podcast, What Lingers, we get the answers. In our third season, we jump right in and take you back to that stage. You'll hear the original story told that night.
Then, we sit down with the storyteller for a deeper conversation to explore what lingers for all of us.
Just a quick note, since these recordings are from the actual stage, the audio might be a bit raw.
Okay, so let's get into it.
How you doing? I promise not to mislead you tonight. The story I'm about to tell is true, but as you've probably started to notice, truth is often stranger than fiction. When I was a boy, my mother asked me this question. If you came across a butterfly struggling to break out of its cocoon, would you help it? Being a tender-hearted boy, I said, "Of course, Mom. I would rip away the cocoon and set it free." She surprised me when she said, "No, son, that would not be a kind thing to do. Because it's the struggle that gives the butterfly the strength to finally fly. If the butterfly doesn't struggle, it will die." Many years later, I was living in the mountains in Badger, California. The property was about 50 miles from the nearest town. I was 16 years old and living with 50 other teenagers. We were part of a social experiment to create an elite human being for the future. It was a live-in drug rehabilitation program called Synanon. On this particular morning, which ended up being the strangest day of my life, I got up at 5 a.m., I went for a 5-mile run, came back, took a shower, reported to the community center for breakfast, and on the community billboard was a message in bold black marker. At 9 a.m. today, we have a special guest, Dr. Julian Best, a renowned expert on rare species of bird, to give a lecture. Attendance is mandatory, followed by a whole slew of exclamation points. This is strange, I thought. Julian Best was the 20-year-old director of our facility. He had a long red beard and freckles, but he certainly was no doctor. I shrugged it off. Another day in the life. And I hurried through my breakfast and reported to the meeting room. Now, the building we were in was called a meeting pod. And it was like a large hexagonal cavern flooded with neon light. And they had put a huge round table in the center of the building. And on top of it, they put a very tall stool. It was covered with newspaper. Oh yeah, back in the day, people got their news that was said to be real news on these long sheets of paper. And some people would actually read it, but mostly they were used to line the bottom of bird cages. And on the newspaper was a bowl filled with birdseed and another bowl filled with water, and signs all over the table that said, "Danger, exotic bird, beware." Eventually, everyone in the community gathered in a circle around the table, and at exactly 9 a.m., Dr. Julian came out, escorted by Terry Haber, who was the director of education, a 44-year-old woman with silver hair cut to her jawline that made her facial features appear like a hawk. The room became silent. Dr. Julian grabbed a microphone and in a booming voice said, "Today we have brought in a rare species of exotic bird who apparently likes to fly away and bite the hand that feeds it. Assistant Director Johnson, will you retrieve the bird?" A few minutes later, he appeared with a girl in a green hoodie. I looked under the hood and I was shocked to see that it was Nora, my dear friend, Nora, who I had known since I was 8 years old. They led her up onto the table, put her on the stool. She was the bird. He continued, "This is the bird who apparently doesn't appreciate the beautiful nest that we built for her up here in the mountains. An oasis that protects us all from the toxic world outside of our fences. We sheltered her, we fed her, we clothed her, but she flew away. What kind of deranged bird would bite the hand that feeds it?" I looked up at her face. She was stoic, angry, and filled with fear. "You like to fly away, don't you, bird?" "No," she gasped. "You like to bite the hand that feeds you, don't you, bird?" "No," she screamed. "Terry, clip her wings." I saw Terry, who had been like a mother to us, holding a pair of scissors. She hopped up on the sage, pulled back the hoodie, and began cutting Nora's long, shiny brown hair. Some of the cuts went to the scalp, and she cut to the scalp, and she cut intentionally at different lengths to create chaos until Nora was there, alone, misshapen, in the spotlight, ashamed, confused, completely humiliated. And then on the loudspeaker came the song, Mockingbird by Carly Simon. "Hey everybody, have you heard? I'm gonna buy you a mockingbird. And if the mockingbird don't sing, I'm gonna buy you a diamond ring." I watched in horror as my circle of friends who I had grown up with were flapping their arms like wings and squawking and mocking her. I stumbled back, tears streaming down my cheek. I couldn't participate. I was outside the circle. It was a circle that I no longer belonged to. I'm ashamed to admit that up until that moment, I didn't realize that I had been misled. I certainly was misled about the bird lecture thing, but I was misled by my community, by my family, by my friends, by my teachers. I finally found the inner strength to question, challenge, and leave Synanon, a innovative drug rehabilitation program that became a cult, a utopian dream that became a dystopian nightmare. And although this story is extreme, when I left and recovered and finally re-entered the real world, I realized that this misleading is everywhere. We've all been misled or betrayed at times by family, friends, religions, spiritual leaders, causes, governments. But I now see it as an opportunity to come back to our own hearts, to face the pain of being lied to, and to awaken to the truth that lives within us. As I look back now, I can see that without that struggle, I would have never found myself, claimed my freedom, and finally began to fly.
Hello again, and today we are here with Robert. Thank you so much for accepting the invite to be at Lingers podcast. We miss you a lot from the stage in Lisbon, and we're so happy to have you here. But for people listening at home, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit and telling us who you are?
Yeah, my name is Robert, and I am a ninth degree black belt in Shaolin Kung Fu, so it's been a big part of my life. It's very extensive in terms of breathing techniques, sound therapy. So there's a spiritual dimension is what I'm getting after. And now I've retired and I'm living in Spain and working as a writer and a messenger and a storyteller.
Amazing. So, Robert, Christian and I both have a million questions about your story, and we're really excited to get into it. But I think maybe before we get into the story itself, I'm wondering if you can give our audience a summary and history of what Synanon really was.
Okay, well, let me start by saying, how did I get in Synanon? It's important because it's the live-in drug rehabilitation facility. Certainly a innovative and amazing program at the time that devolved into a cult. I like to say a utopian dream that became a dystopian nightmare. But both my parents were heroin addicts, and so I grew up in that poverty and might say that neglect. And it came to a point where my mom was going to commit suicide. And she attempted suicide by turning on the gas. She was going to take her own life and me, my brother, and my father. But she collapsed on the floor before getting to the gas. And when she woke up, there was a light coming through the window, and she took that as a sign from God that you need to get your life together, and this is not working. And so she called Child Protective Services, and me and my brother were taken from the home into a foster home.
And how old are you when this happens?
I was 4 years old, and my brother was 1 year old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so then the foster home, though, turned out to be, of course, the American dream. The father was a fireman, a Christian family, but it was actually an abusive home. And you were to say we're being beaten in the name of God, trying to get the demons out of us when I saw the demons in the eyes of my foster parents when they were beating me. And so what was so difficult about that was I didn't know that wasn't going to be the rest of my life. I didn't know if my mother would ever come back and if this was just our fate. And I think what it caused me to do is go deeper inside myself, which is, I find to be a blessing now, because at least I know where to go to find myself. But anyways, my mom, she had subsequently gone into Synanon, and she petitioned the courts to get me and my brother returned to custody. But now she had the legal power of Synanon behind her. And so she was able to get us both back, and we moved to Synanon and were in one of the schools in Synanon because this was like in the late 60s.
And just quickly, what age are you now that you go into Synanon?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm 8 years old when I went into Synanon. So it was like 1967.
So you're one of the kids that grew up in Synanon.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a Synanon kid. And so I wasn't a drug addict, but I was there as a lifestyle choice. You didn't live with your parents, you lived in this school. But all the dynamics of Synanon were the program that we were also on. We played the Synanon game.
Yes, and I'm just gonna stop you right there because I think the Synanon game, from what I know from documentaries and podcasts, the Synanon game is well, it's unique and also not quite so unique because I think there's different variations in different groups and different therapies. But can you explain what the Synanon game is?
Yeah, so it's like a group encounter session, but as you say, it has its own unique twist. You sit in a circle, and so what happens is the game is on someone. So, Robert, I want to talk to you. You've been doing this and this. And so the first part of the game is everyone attacking you about some behavior, some issue that they have with you. The rules of the Synanon game are no violence and no threats of violence, but verbally, everything's allowable. And usually what happens through that process is then you defend yourself. You're yelling back and you're saying, no, I never do things like that. It's like a basic argument in any relationship. But eventually they keep attacking you because you have everyone in the circle putting the game on you, which means it's all about your faults, what you need to correct, how you need to get better. And what eventually happens is you break down. And when you break down, you open up. And you say, oh my God, that was because of this. And I was in this foster home and they didn't treat me. And then the next part of the game is they put you back together. Then they start saying some of the positive things. And yeah, we really do appreciate this about you. And this you can work on, but we love you. And then it will go on to the next person.
I just want to stop for a second because I'm watching Christian's face, and I think Christian's never heard of the game. So I'm just wondering, what's your impression of it?
It's so crazy because when you start talking about the circle, I work with sharing circles and I was like, oh, yeah, nice. I love this sharing circle. And then it's like becoming this crazy thing. We had a reality show in Colombia and they had this thing called The Wall where they put someone on the wall and everyone were attacking it. So my memory went to that place. But of course, I think in the history of medicine and psychology and all these attempts to getting better and healthier, humanity somehow got the craziest and ways of trying to do good and doing more harm by it. And this is clearly for me one example.
I have this perspective of coming in and seeing and feeling a lot of positives, but the caveat is I was a kid. I didn't really know any better. And the previous world I had was so crazy that I actually came to this like a person dying of thirst from the desert. I had gone so deep inside myself that I wouldn't actually talk. So in the game, it was the big issue for the first couple of years I was there because I wouldn't say anything. They would put the game on me and I would just freeze. And so they were always talking about, well, why don't you talk in games? Once I got outside the game, I could talk to a person one-on-one, but I got very nervous when there were more people talking. But so I have this perspective of seeing what the positives were and somewhat reminiscing or just what an amazing social experiment and what amazing work they were doing. This process, yes, it's very rough, and it's probably why when I came to Lisbon and I was in your circle, Christian, I loved it because it's very gentle and it actually allows a person to do the exact same work, but in a more holistic and healthy way. But that being said, people there are dealing with a lot of shadows and things under the surface, and this pushes it up. And so a game would be anywhere from 1 to 3 hours long. And after that experience, there was such a cathartic feeling, and everyone was so bonded because you get to see the deeper level of a person, which savior circle in Lisbon doesn't normally happen within the confines of society and family and dysfunctionality. So I saw some of the positive sides of it, and eventually I began opening up too. It may have been responsible for me coming out of my shell and learning how to express my feelings and maybe fight back if I'm under attack. But generally, it did devolve. And I think the big part of the Synanon experience for me was to get a front row seat on what cultism is and how it happens slowly. It sounds so horrific later when we look back and look from the outside in. At that time, it was a national sensation. Nobody had ever tried this. Dope fiends curing other dope fiends, living in community. In the very beginning, that you were supposed to graduate, but people went out and started using again. So finally, Chuck, Charles E. Dietrich, who was the director and you might say eventual cult leader, said, okay, that doesn't work. We're going to make this a lifestyle. And then he went on to make it a religion. And then he went on to have people who weren't drug addicts or alcoholics come in, lifestylers, they called them, squares. And then people would come in and donate millions of dollars. Celebrities brought their children there. They were talking about it on national news. The White House released a clip about it and said, this is a miracle on the beach. So just to say, what looks like something so completely heinous so many times starts with the best intentions to build something good. And I'm going to say in the beginning, for me, it was good.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I just think that's the complexity of these cult situations, is that they're not cults because they're completely like these evil spaces. In some ways, they push boundaries and they create a lot of good. And it's really interesting because I think a lot of cult spaces or whatever, they have this one aspect, the game and Synanon, but they have this aspect of this, you have to have this great catharsis where you let your whole self out, right? I think in something like Scientology, there's these similar mechanisms to get you really hooked into believing, because it can create positive change and then it can also create negative change. It's just not so easy to say it's like completely bad.
And it's so subtle. It's like a disease that develops over time. And so you're talking about 10 years of no one noticing anything, but only with small signals of unhealthy control, groupthink type of activity. And so no one questions it. And then next thing you know, develops and you're in the deeper waters. And my story actually is on the verge of them crossing over into a really dark place. It was the sign that woke me up. But for everyone, that's different, right?
Of course.
So, talking about your story and the specific moment that happens here, well, of course, I had the questions like how Nora ended up there, but if this is a cult where family brings their kids, so probably you met Nora since you were 8, you mentioned it. So probably she was also a kid that was brought up from her parents into the cult, as many other kids. You mentioned that this is all the kids have been growing up with, and suddenly in that moment you don't recognize them. But I'm wondering what happened with Nora. I mean, why she was taken to this crazy trial, basically, and what was so bad that she did?
Well, as I said, in the beginning, the program was designed for people to graduate, and then it would be a rehabilitation. You'd go back to normal life and be a healthy person. But once they decided that didn't work, it became a lifestyle by which you were expected to live the rest of your life in Synanon. And then it became, you can't go outside. You can't visit family and friends. Like when I was younger, my mom used to take me and my brother to the movies, and I'm so happy because it's like getting out of jail. Hey, we're out in the world. I get to do normal things. But then it's an act of extreme betrayal. If you leave Synanon or go back to visit your family, they called it splitting. And this whole idea that you bite the hand that feeds you. We have paradise here. Why would you go back to that kind of trashy world when we fed you, we nurtured you, we cared for you? So her big line by which this was this dystopian type of theme happened was because she split. She went back, she ran away, we would call it, to go visit her parents. And then she got freaked out and came back. And so this whole thing was about you left. But the one thing is, there's probably a signature on cultish behavior in this story, but the imagination level of how they did it to me was even more chilling. They made this whole thing about a bird.
I'm listening to the story, because I had listened to it on the stage a few years ago, and then when re-listening in preparation for today, it makes my body hurt in a way. Like the amount of cruelty in it, even as I say that now, it's just very intense.
I just want to mention that we had several human experiences at Storytelling Lisboa. And I feel like we listened to a few stories that were scary or frightening, but this moment lingers in my memory as me watching you on stage. And when you said Terry clip her wings, I remember sinking into my share of fear of what the hell is going on in this place. So indeed, I think this is one of the heaviest stories we had on stage of storytelling.
It's like the thing where you may think, I would rather be hit than hurt in this way. It's so devious because it's so psychologically damaging. And when I say it was the precipice, historically, that was when they were turning the corner to this type of cruelty and mind control. And then eventually it went to violence, because our big rule was no physical violence. And when I've watched the documentaries, I'm like, Chuck, if you just kept to that rule, if you just kept to that rule. But of course, it's not that simple, because psychological mind control and cruelty in some ways is more devastating. And of course, it's horrible to be hit. I was hit and beaten the whole time I was in the foster home. But that moment, to me, was more damaging to me in terms of looking into what human beings are capable of. It's like being in a front row seat of any of the horrible political movements, religious movements, and the darkness that they cause, the shadows that they cast, and the damage that they do to us in heart, mind, and soul.
It reminds me of, we talk about like these Stanford prison experiments where people in groups are forced to be evil. And I know there's problems with how the Stanford prison experiments were carried out, and maybe we can't deduce so much from them. But to me, it seems like this is a group of people that you've grown up with. And this is a group of people that I'm guessing individually in your individual relationships with them, like they aren't necessarily cruel people. The woman that ends up cutting her hair has been like a mother to you. The other doctor guy, I'm sure he's the guy that you guys look up to and takes care of you in some way. And the other people flapping their wings are your friends. And so individually, they're people, they're humans, but then en masse, they become this cruel, brutal group to somebody that's part of the group, and you're in the group. And I'm wondering if you could just slow us down to that moment where you begin to cry because you realize, oh my God, I'm like, you're standing in the group and you can't be a part of the group. And this is a very profound thing. At 16, your whole world, the world suddenly becomes something you don't want to be in.
Yeah. And so I think that I had an advantage now looking back that my friends didn't have. And that's because when I was 12 years old, my mother forcibly removed me from Synanon. She left Synanon. She saw what was happening. She said it's not the same as the program I signed up for. This was probably about 1970. And she took me and my brother out. Me, I didn't want to go. My brother wanted to go. And I was happy in Synanon. I had friends. I had started to open up. I thrived in the environment. But I did not fit in at all in the outside world. Then I was really a stranger in a strange land. I was getting picked on in school, and I just was an absolute misfit with my history before that. But then having learned this whole new way of living to come out and try to deal with society as it is, I was miserable. And Synanon had told me, we can't do anything about it legally now, but when you're 14, if you want, you can file for emancipation, and we'll fight on your behalf to get you back to Synanon if you want to come. And so my mom was very fair, open-minded, and liberal person. And my mom had told me, she said, when you're old enough, if you want to go back, I'll let you go. And so it was at 14 that I said, I can't take it out here. I want to go back. So I went back to the facility in Badger because before I had been in Tamales Bay. And at that time, the advanced stages of cultism weren't really present. It was just this amazing lifestyle with these amazing new education programs. We were building geodesic domes, Buckminster Fuller, new ways of approaching education, et cetera. And I had thrived on all that. So that's my first advantage, is I had a break to get it. It's like you were with somebody and then you went away and then you go, wow, you've really grown, right? Nobody else notices, but I notice, okay, something's different here. Like I can't put my finger on it, but there's something is not right.
Yeah, you had a counterpoint because you had your first counterpoint was like this religious, abusive, awful home. And now you have another counterpoint of a world you don't fit into, but a world that might have some rules that make more sense.
Yeah. And then what I started doing as I noticed that because this thing, you wake up in the morning, they're shouting slogans at you all day long. You start off with a morning prayer service. We say the Synanon philosophy. You repeat it every day like a mantra. It's taken from Emerson's essay on self-reliance, which I'm going to say, let's not throw Emerson under the bus. It's actually a really good concept. But all this is going into your subconscious mind. You're really being programmed. And then in Badger, they were making us into this elite human being. So we were running and doing advanced physical training in the morning, deep schoolwork after that, work in the afternoon, groups therapy sessions in the evening. So you never had a chance to think about what was going on. And they talk about it now is that they had started, which wasn't there when I was younger. Chuck had his voice piped in. They called it the wire. He had his voice piped into every facility. So when you walked into any place, you could hear him talking in your mind. So what I did, which I now find extraordinary because I was so young, was I woke up an hour early every morning, even though we were getting up at 5:30. I would wake up at 4:30 and I would sit and I would read and I would meditate and reflect. And I feel that's where I got the perspective to see and to put some distance between me and what was happening. I found this place of awareness where then I could then discern and not just take in everything as, oh, this is the gospel truth. I could stand outside of it and look, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And wait a minute, my friend's acting like this. They've never been like this before. And something's wrong in paradise. And it's with that perspective that I feel that I went into that meeting, and it gave me that advantage of being able to see what was going on. But that was as horrific as it had ever been up to that point. And so that's when I'm like, no, I cannot. I don't care what it costs me. I'm not going down that road.
Oh, so I have two questions. First, when we were talking about your mom taking in and out and being here and being there, the one question that pops into my mind is, where was your dad in all of this story?
Yeah, my dad died of an overdose when I was 12. So he never had gone into Synanon. My mom told me the story that when she first got together with him and loved him and he was an addict, she told herself, well, if I become an addict too, he'll see what it's doing to me and then he'll quit. But it doesn't really work like that.
Oh my God.
And so he had been running the streets, had been in and out of prison, and I had been waiting for him to come back because you always have this dream of who your father is and that he's going to come back and save you and rescue you. And when my mom told me she had conspired with Synanon, and they said, don't put any emotion when you tell him because he doesn't care. And so if you put any emotion, you're going to be imposing it on him. So we were just sitting and talking, and she just, oh yeah, and by the way, your dad died the other day of an overdose, and then she just went on. But that hit me like a brick truck. I was like literally catapulted into a state of disconnection in my body. And I think it was for like 2 weeks. Again, I was so used to being quiet, I didn't say anything. But this is interesting because I went to get a haircut. And after I got the haircut, the person had messed up my hair so bad that I all of a sudden burst out like crying, but curled up in a ball in the room and just was like moaning and groaning like a wounded animal. And then when they said, "What's wrong?" And behind that was my grief for my dad, which I wasn't really allowed to express there, because also the attitude of Synanon, even once I did say, this is why I'm grieving and so upset, they're like, he's just a junkie. He's just a drug addict. You shouldn't waste any time thinking about him.
That strikes me so much because when I think of the game and Synanon, I feel like the positive way of me viewing the game is that it allows the whole human range of emotions, and it allows anger, which I think, especially maybe for women, it's not so easy to just be angry and be accepted. But then to dismiss your grief for your father, I can't.
Yeah, it's really anything goes as long as there's not violence or the threat of violence. And so what they had was almost there was a ranking. Your status in Synanon was based on how well you played the game. And they called them really excellent master game players were always promoted and put to the highest level, right? And everyone was weighing themselves against how well you could play the game.
So you're encouraged to really be extreme, right?
The people who can manipulate emotions the most are the ones they win, right?
As long as you don't get physical, I guess.
Yeah.
It's so crazy because I think, like, of course, nowadays people are more aware and we talk more about this and mental health. But probably 10 years ago, yeah, even me growing up in Colombia, where there's a lot of physical abuse, a lot of violence towards women, still probably nowadays. Yeah, people don't realize how violent and how powerful words and emotional manipulation can be, because at some point, like, your body can heal from a wound, from an accident, a hit or something, like, physically. But the scar, as you said, the scar that it's infringed on a memory or an emotional level, it takes a lifetime to heal, probably. So I think back in the day, we were not aware of that. And probably that's why these people were like, yeah, as long as you don't get physical is the worst part. And actually, it is a bad part, but it's not the only bad part that you can have in being violent and abusive.
You might call it psychological violence.
So, yeah, the other question I had besides your dad was that, well, you are here in this moment of kind of realization and illumination of, like, this is not the place where I belong. And what happened next?
This incident happened, and it had a major emotional shock to me. And so because I didn't participate, the group turned on me. The postscript of the story was that there was this whole program that they had devised for Nora, by which she would be the kind of like the lottery, the lottery, where it's like she's the scapegoat of the community. And so she had to do nothing but labor from morning till night. Anyone could come over to her and tell her to do anything, and she had to do it. They pushed her so hard that they said, if she collapsed, give her mouth to ear resuscitation.
What does that mean?
That means come down and just yell, "Get that fuck up, Bird!" And you weren't allowed to call her by her name. She was to be called Bird.
And what were some of the things that people were asking her to do?
Go over and pick this up for me, or do that, or wash my thing. She's like the house slave, right? And in breakfast time, we sat at tables, and there was a little table put way down to the ground with a little chair with an image of the big bird, and it said the bird, and she had to sit at that table and eat her meals in the face of the community.
Oh my God, this is so nasty. Jesus.
They're very nasty. And so anyways, I got put on that program.
Just to clarify, you got put on that program like you were another bird?
Now, I wasn't a bird, but I was, I guess, a bird associate.
Oh.
Sorry to laugh. It's a
No,
personal-
I laugh too because it's just so horrifying and it's also absurd, right? Oh,
It's absurd. And I had to work from morning till night. And so I was on the same thing, but I wasn't at the lower level that she was. I didn't have a little table that I had to sit at, but I was disrespected in the same way. And the whole thing was to put us on this thing for 21 days to get our mind right. Right. And to see if we could come back and appreciate Synanon and give ourselves back over to the group. And for me, I had to make this decision because I could have, quote, split. I could have run away. And I know I could have went back to my mom and she would have took me with open arms. I actually snuck away and called my mom. And she said, I'm afraid for you. Get out of there. And I said, it's in the story, but she had told me this story about the butterfly. And if you save the butterfly without the struggle, the butterfly won't be strong enough to fly. And so I told her, I said, I need to face this community and stand up and tell them that something's wrong with what they're doing and be strong enough to go against the tide of the group. Otherwise, I'll never be strong enough for the rest of my life if I just run from it. And maybe it's that moment where I'm like, I'm not a boy anymore. I'm becoming a man, right? And so I'm going to stay and I'm going to face this. So what ended up happening is these stews, like the stew is a game that lasts for 48 to 72 hours. So yeah, it's very much like Est or something like that, right? Where if you didn't break down from a game, you'll definitely break down when you're deprived of sleep and food and everything else. And these stews were directed towards me because I had told them that at the end of a month, I want to leave. But I'm going to stay here and face this and to this community and let them know why I'm leaving and why I think what you're doing is wrong, which was a bold choice. Maybe if it was further down the road, violence would have been committed or my life would have been threatened because that ended up happening later. But as it was, they did these massive stews. And I just remember one, as I was getting ready to leave on one particular stew, they used every manipulation in the book. They're like, these are all your friends. You've been raised with them. These are your brothers and sisters. You live in paradise here. You can have anything you want. They literally did because everyone was donating massive amounts of money. So Synanon was really quite rich. You live in the mountains. You're eating the best meals. You're getting the best schooling and everything. But mostly what was in that particular stew was the fact that when I looked around that circle and I saw all my friends, they're all looking at me like, Robbie, come back to us. All you have to do is say the right thing and you'll be back in our circle and we'll love you again. Just say what they want you to say. I reached a point that night where it's like, all I have to do is say yes, and I get everything back. Right. And then I'm loved and accepted, which is what we all want, right? But that's when I said, this is the moment of truth. And I reached deep down in my heart and I went, no, I'm going. And then everyone turned away from me. All my friends, you're not a person anymore. You're dead to us.
It's just so intense because that must be so enticing, right? You know the secret to get back into the love circle. And you're 16 years old and somehow you managed to be like, no, like I know deep down in me, this is not right and I must leave. Yeah, I can't imagine having to make that decision in such a stark way at that age.
Yeah, and to me, the postscript of it is that as I walked out of Synanon and as I went back into life and went into other groups that were doing other projects and things, the first thing I feel is I had a superpower to understand what cultism is. So I understood the signature. Sometimes if people are presenting new ideas, everyone's, oh, that's a cult. I said, no, it's not. New ideas aren't a cult. We need new ideas. But there's a very specific phenomenon that happens, and I had witnessed it up close. It's when you give over your thoughts and your will to the group mentality, to the group vision, to the group ideals. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good it is. Suddenly you question yourself and you exchange the group for yourself. What I noticed is that's happening everywhere. Your family, your religion, your political party, your new cause. You get in and like, yeah, we're all for this thing. And then it's suddenly, well, what did you do on Saturday night? You don't care enough about the cause. How come we're doing this and this? And it gave me the strength to be able to be myself and not be absorbed. Like I can go and attend groups. Again, I'm going to give Christian a shout out. His group, his Circle Conscientious Cafe, is so what is needed in the future because it's totally honoring people to claim their own truth without pressure from the group to conform to any particular idea, right? And how can we be authentic until we find our truth and it's okay for us to have it and live it, right? That we don't have to be a part of a group, but we all want to be loved and accepted. So that's the difficult part, right? And so then it's easy to give that power away. And there were several markers where I was part of something that, whether it was a company or whether it was kind of spiritual movement or whatever, and I was able to go, no, okay, that's enough, and turn and walk away. And I don't know if I would have had that if I hadn't had that experience so early in my life. It was like a major lesson.
I'm thinking because, of course, you had all of this experience because you kept going to Synanon. But I'm wondering, how was your brother situation then when you left? And how's your brother now? And how's your relationship with your brother?
My brother's 3 years younger. I feel that all of our experiences were more difficult to handle for him than they were to me. But then I also felt like I had to grow up sooner because I had to protect my brother. Like he's the only constant all the way through. So in the home, in the foster home, in Synanon, when we got out of Synanon, it's like I'm over him and trying to protect him, but sometimes that responsibility was just too big. And I carried a lot of guilt that is maybe I didn't do enough to protect him. And so I think my vision for him is the emotional damage is it's more heart-centered. Because for me, I had my mind to navigate it. I was a little bit older, so I could think about what was going on. He just like viscerally going through this madness and just emotionally trying to adapt to it. As to how we are today, I'm just so close and bonded to him because he's the one person that we share a common story. Nobody else on earth is going to know this story that only him and I went through. And we went through everything and we survived everything together. When he got older and when we would argue about different ideas, most of them being political, I reached a point where I thought of the arguments and I said, this is ridiculous. Why am I letting my mind get in the way? This is my brother and I love him. So rather than arguing back to him, I started asking him, tell me more about why you have that position or why you think that. And as we got to the heart of it, it was always connected to something good. And it allowed me to make my way back to his heart and get to the point where I'm like, we don't need to talk about any of this stuff. You're my brother and I love you and I'm always going to love you till the end of time. You share the story with me. And we understand something when we look in each other's eye that I can tell people about it and you can have empathy and everything, but to actually live it together and go through it together creates a very special bond.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm tearing a little bit here because this morning I woke up thinking about my sister, which I haven't talked in probably 6 months. And today I woke up thinking like I want to reach out to her, and just by listening to this moment is like, yeah, this is the sign I need to reach out to my sister.
Yeah. Aw. And speaking of people living this experience together, what about Nora? What about these other people that were in the room with you that day? Did you have a relationship with them once you left, or did you ever reconnect with them later in your life?
Yeah, so it seems to me that once I left, of course, we couldn't be in communication to each other. And also, I had to be the trader. In order for them to survive in Synanon, they could not, they couldn't maintain a relationship with me. There's one friendship that I had that was like a lifeline for me. This to me was like a soul brother. And we were just so bonded in every way. Like we understood things that kids don't understand. And yet we both talked about it and we're like, oh, you get it. Or you get it. And so I haven't been in touch with any of them. There's been reunions, but it borders between me being curious, but also being somewhat afraid. So the times that there were reunions, I didn't go back. I even have thought about reaching out to my friend, and maybe I'll take a cue from Christian of maybe it's time to do that. But I think one of the things is I romanticize that connection, and it means so much to me that I'm afraid of reaching out to him after all these years and find that something's lost and I shouldn't. I should just be able to show up and find out. But so yeah, the answer is I haven't really been in touch with anyone in Synanon. It's a very strange feeling to have shared such a deep thing, especially with my immediate circle of friends. We went through it together. Oh, but what is interesting is my mom ended up adopting one of the girls that I grew up with into our family outside of Synanon. And so I grew up with her as my sister. And sadly, she eventually died of a drug overdose. But I did have that sisterhood with her growing up.
And what happened with your mom afterwards? And is your mom still alive?
I know my mom passed about 15 years ago. And so, but the last 20 years of her life, she got clean and sober. And so what was amazing is when she went back into alcohol and drugs, and she struggled her whole life with mental illness. I watched the light in her eyes fade. And I remember one day sitting at the table and going, I can't see my mom anymore. She's not in there. There was like a dark space and she's not there. And then when she had come to my work, and when she came to my work, she was living on the street and she asked me for money. And I had been through this story with her so many times. I just snapped and I said, Mom, I said, if this is how you choose to live, you're going to have to go for it. But I can't take it anymore. It's too hurtful and damaging to me. I can't have you in my life if this is the life you choose. And she told me years later that if any other person could have got her to quit, it was that moment with me, because I didn't talk to her for 2 years. But she said, I needed to choose it because I reached my personal bottom and I couldn't live another day with myself. And when she went into recovery, I slowly saw the light come back into her eyes. She became a psychiatric nurse, which is really cool because she had suffered all these things and worked with rehabilitation programs and people with mental illness. And so the last 20 years of her life were very rich, and I got to see her live out her dreams and come back to life. So that was a nice little bow on the story.
Oh, well, that's amazing. And so you left Synanon, and then you talked about how Synanon evolved. And can you just talk a little bit about maybe what happened exactly with the violence coming?
Yeah, I heard about all these things in news reports after I had left. So a lot of it ended up being on news stories that I could watch on the news at night. And so sometimes I was shocked and said, I know that guy, or oh yeah. The thing is, it all made perfect sense to me that the direction I saw it going in, it couldn't help but devolve in that way. And so the guy who was charged with putting the rattlesnake in the mailbox of somebody who was a reporter investigating the abuses at Synanon, that was like one of my friends who I grew up with. And I observed some of those tendencies in him when we were in Badger together. And he was recruited into what's called the Imperial Marines and became a leader of defending Synanon. It just made perfect sense to me, but at the same time, I was shocked because it was like a boyhood friend. and who we had shared all these experiences with. But I will say that Synanon really threw him and one other guy under the bus because it was all at the behest of Chuck. I have really mixed feelings about Chuck because in the early part of my life, he was a bit of a hero, somebody who had a father figure.
Right. And Chuck was the leader of Synanon, the man who created it and saw it through.
Yeah, Charles E. Dietrich. And so, yeah, all his philosophies and stuff were really cool, and I really was nurtured by that. But it's so tragic to me how he fell into the abuse of power, which makes total sense. It doesn't make sense, but it makes sense that if I wear overalls and then suddenly everyone is wearing overalls, if I shave my head and everyone shaves their head, I start to think of myself as like a godlike figure. It's amazing. I could say anything and these people will do it. And so couples weren't allowed to be together anymore. You had to just break up your relationship and go be with a new partner at the demand of Chuck, because he had lost his wife. She died of cancer. And so since he had to go and find a new relationship, now your marriage is disillusioned, dissolved, and now you need to pick somebody or we'll assign someone to you and you're going to be married to them now. And everyone did it. All the women are now, we don't want children anymore. Children are a burden on our society. Okay, all the women are going to have hysterectomies and the men are going to get vasectomies. And this kind of crazy stuff. And then suddenly he went over the line with violence and he's okay. First, they brought in people to rehabilitate them who were in the criminal system, and they called them the punk squad. But then it became, well, we can beat these people. And then it's, well, you beat anyone who disagrees with us, beat the shit out of them. And then he started drinking. So all the principles of Synanon.
What?
Yeah. And then trying to pull it off. No, we drink now, but when you think about it, it's a sad story. He fell back into his own addictions, into his own mental illness. And it's too much power and control for one person. Everyone hangs on your word. He was so charismatic. He was so cool. I remember being a boy and he'd say, hey, Oshkosh, come over here. And he'd put his arm around me. And he's the one who is accredited with the phrase, this day is the first day of the rest of your life. And we would have plays and things where people came up with these slogans. So a lot of really good things, but then when it collapses, it's really dark. And so I consider it a tragedy. So I have some feelings. I have probably more feelings of just compassion for him as a human being than I do anger, although of course I understand people who are very angry about the abuses that they suffered, etc. And it's part of a spectrum of our emotions. But to me, I feel like, oh, Chuck, you had such a beautiful idea. Why did you let it fall away?
Absolutely. And does Synanon still exist today in any form?
No, it disbanded. Eventually, they faced major lawsuits and they went after the money, which is how you always dismantle. But there's many groups around the country that are from ex-Synanon members who have, in one way or another, tried to recreate what Synanon was. I would say, I don't know, I'm not in any of them, so I have no firsthand knowledge. But from an outside view, some of them did their best to make it into a positive and to correct the wrongs. And some of them fell right back into the same thing and became very cultish themselves. So if you really investigate that world, you can follow the strands of all these Synanon seedlings who came out and tried to continue it. For me, being a leader of a community when I was teaching Kung Fu, it gave me a protection to be a good leader, to not accept people giving me their power and to always hand it back to them. My title in that is master teacher. But what I told everyone, I became very uncomfortable with this idea. So I told everyone, no, I'm only here to nurture the master within you. If I'm your master, you'll be lost, right? There's something in you. I'm just giving you the tools to find it. And I accredit that to my experience in Synanon, that I could see the onset of cultism and constantly diffuse it and give people their power back and say, no, don't make this the thing. right? This is beautiful what we're doing, and we have a great community here, but let's not make this as if this is the thing that's the utopian vision. We're finally making everything in the world right. We're going to change the world, right? And so in that way, you know how it is after you've been through painful lessons, it's later in life that you look back and you can appreciate them and realize that they gave you elements of compassion and wisdom and understanding that you can apply to better your own life and to deepen your relationships and make things more intimate in an authentic way.
Yeah. Oh, Robert, thank you so much. It's been such a inspiring and emotional, for me at least, talk. Thank you so much. It's been amazing. I think we are close to the end, right, Liz?
Yeah, I think we are, which is, Christian and I have so many more questions, I'm sure.
No, you should do another podcast called What Keeps Lingering? What's lingers after the lingering has been done?
Not even kidding. I've actually thought of that. Like, I didn't think of it with that name, but now you've given me the idea. But seriously, sometimes we're done with the interviews and I'm like, wait, I had more. Can we do a what lingers on the what lingers? Yeah. But we have a final question for you today, which is, how has it been revisiting your story?
It's been amazing. It's been healing. I find the great gift of storytelling is telling your story, particularly in public and maybe even to strangers, is one of the most powerful things you can do, because it's a way of owning yourself. And naturally, when I came to do the podcast, I was thinking about, well, what will I say and what does this mean? And do I really want to relive this and all those things? And I came to what my life has brought me to this moment, which is don't plan anything. Just be authentic and be yourself. And I found our conversation was so natural and flowing. And so I can even feel the space in here where I've more healing and more room for me to be here. And so I'm thankful for that. And I'm really thankful for both of you, your presence in my life and for holding that space. Storytelling, it is a monumental crossroads on my journey in life. And it really gave me the gift of owning who I am and what my story is and no longer hiding from it. And all the stories I told, that sometimes I probably went over the line. I don't know if there is one, but it was so helpful and to hear other people's stories as well. We're human. And part of the beautiful thing about this is the human story, and just own that and not have to be ashamed of it. So I thank you both for having me today, and I had the most amazing experience.
That's it for this episode of What Lingers.
If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. It really helps us reach more listeners. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, we'd love for you to share this episode with them.
What Lingers is a podcast from the team behind Storytelling Lisboa, and is produced by both Liz and I, and edited by Liz.
We're a small project, and your support truly motivates us to keep going.
Would also love to hear from you. Feel free to send us a DM or even a voice note with your thoughts, your comments, or questions to our Instagram @WhatLingersPod.
Don't forget to subscribe and follow us so you never miss what lingers next.
Bye!
Bye!